Hey guys, this is day 2 of our, quarantine at home. I hope you guys are staying at home or at least practicing social distance. That's what I'm doing. I spent the day just kind of hanging out at home yesterday, and so I hope that you guys are doing the same or at least practicing social distance. I don't really have a lot of major advice today. The video today is going to be a little different. Hopefully, you guys will like it. I'm going to try to do something fun on different days. I even have a possibility of an even cooler special guest besides the dog, who right now is not ready for her star moment as she's snoring. So if you hear some weird noise in the background, that is probably the dog snoring. So I do have a possibility of something cool coming. I don't know when though, so I will keep you updated. So make sure you watch these videos because you never know. And also, make sure you encourage others to check their faith email or at least forward them this link if because you just never know who's going to show up. Anyway, so some of you know that once a week I do a podcast with 2 of my classes, and occasionally I'll do it with another class, and it's called History or His Story, and it is 2 true stories and 1 false. It's a podcast, which, by the way, if you like the stories I'm telling you, I'm just kind of shortening the details that they give, and so there are quite a few of them. I think like close to 15 episodes. So if you're bored and you're like, that sounds fun. It's 3 guys, and the one guy was a history teacher, and he tells 3 stories. 2 of them are true, and 1 is false, and you have to try to figure out, along with his friends, what the false story is. So I'm going to tell you shortened ones, and by the way, I did get permission from them to tell these stories. But yeah, seriously, if you're bored, I love listening to them. I listen to them while I'm doing stuff, especially driving, which right now I'm not really going anywhere, but just while I'm washing dishes or, doing things, I listen to their podcast. So that's my advice. Check them out. They're pretty awesome. And they're pretty funny. I don't know what my favorite episode would be. Like the first one's on Titanic. That's a fun one to listen to. But this week's topic is missiles. So I'm going to tell you the 3 stories. It's kind of weird because you can't ask me questions like you guys normally do. And then I'll kind of pause for a couple seconds, and then I'll tell you which one is false and why it's false. So the topic this week is missiles. And so I actually took notes this time because some of you know when I tell you in history class or in lit, I sometimes forget the details and then it sounds false. So I took notes this time. It was good. And so, yeah, it's a bummer you guys can't ask me questions, but and by the way, if you want to send like a message, I know you can't comment on the video. They have like a lock on it for 30 days because I have to mark that this one is, this video is for people under 18. And so because of that, they have to block comments for 30 days. I don't really know why. So if you have a question or you want to comment like, hey, I got it right, you can send me an email. I would love that, or don't forget, if you have questions on your homework, I know especially junior high, you're taking at-home tests. If you're like, hey, I need a page number, or I don't understand this question, remember, email me. Okay, so anyway, back to the 3 stories. Okay, first of all, the different titles. So story number 1 is, shoot, I didn't write down the stories, like the story titles. It is Pigeons Direct Missiles. These are not the titles he came up with. His were way better. Sorry. Story number 2 is Einstein and his Madness Missile Plan. These are terrible titles. And then 1960s ice missiles melted by global warming. And just so you know, too, he does put a disclaimer on there that he is not saying global warming is necessarily true. What he's saying in there is that they determined that it was global warming that caused the problem. So you have to take that one obviously with a grain of salt. That scientists said it was global warming that caused it. So I'm just going to put that note in there right now. So you don't have to say that one's false because of global warming. So this is just what scientists said. So go with that when you're listening to that one. It could be false for a different reason. I don't know. Okay, so story number 1 is about the pigeons. I'm just going to go in order so we don't get confused. So this is story number 1. So there was a psychologist. His name was B.F. Skinner. Probably those of you in 11th and 12th grade, especially if you took psychology, have heard of him. He was about positive and negative reinforcement. So if you did something negative, you need some kind of a negative consequence. If you did something positive, And they would train you by giving you, like a treat. So like every time I'm trying to think. So like dogs, when you're training your dog, say every time the dog goes out and goes potty, when that's a puppy, you give them a treat. And then they think of that as like, oh, I must have done something good because I got a treat. And so that is kind of how they trained, and he definitely believed in that. And so we needed a more accurate way to send out missiles. And so he was given money by the U.S. government to come up with a new plan, because we just weren't quite accurate at this point. This was World War II. And so he decides that he's going to use pigeons. And you're like, what? The bird? Yes. So what his plan was is he would put a nose cone on the pigeon. And through training, through this positive reinforcement, he would actually have them direct the missiles. And you're like, what? And this one gets a little like, what is his plan? But so he would put a nose screen or a nose cone on with a screen, and he'd project an image. And then the pigeon had to peck the image, but they would be trained how to do that with that positive reinforcement. And so while doing that pecking, it would actually guide the missile, and the missile would actually follow it. Through his testing, they actually found it was pretty accurate. A lot of psychologists and different people in that world thought it was amazing, and it seemed like the results were turning out really well, but the U.S. government didn't trust it. And so he did quite a bit of testing. It seemed to be pretty accurate, but the U.S. government actually ended up scratching that later because it just, can you really trust a pigeon? I don't know. And so it was a cool plan. But it did not come to fruition. By the way, these are all plans for missiles. These did not actually get carried out. I forgot to tell you that at the beginning. So story number 1, B.F. Skinner and the pigeons. Then we have story number 2, which is Einstein. Okay, now Einstein, I don't know if you know this, was German. He moved to the United States right before the Holocaust. He was a Jew. And so that was really great actually for him and for science, because he obviously did a lot of stuff. Hopefully you guys know that he was instrumental in the atomic bomb and developing that during World War II. And so right after World War II, we go into the Cold War. And so during the Cold War, there were different plans that they were trying to do. Different countries had different, so like the Soviet Union was trying to come up with a plan to place missiles throughout the world so that way they could attack capitalist countries, especially the United States. For example, there was the Cuba missile crisis. They were kind of placing just kind of missiles around the world to get ready for a possible World War III. Well, the United States does the same. The United States had them throughout the world as well. And so Einstein comes up with a plan to use these missiles on different bases. And what his plan is that, and by the way, these were not nuclear at this point. They were just different missiles that they were going to use. And what their plan was, Einstein's plan was to use 11, so they made up a list of 1,000 cities. These were all communist cities. They were not all in the Soviet Union. For example, part of Japan was communist, part of Germany was communist, North Korea, North Vietnam, those countries. So what their plan was, or Einstein's plan, I keep saying Einstein's plan was to attack 11 cities daily. So what they would do is they would use those missiles that they placed around the world and shoot them off and attack 11 cities. What it would do is it would overwhelm the Soviet Union, and they wouldn't even know where to kind of send relief and help, and it would just kind of overwhelm them. And his plan was to do it every day. So we do it one day, and if they didn't surrender or give in, then we would do it day 2, and we would keep going until we did all 1,000 cities. And so his plan was, let's use these bases, let's overwhelm them and get it done. And it just never came to fruition. I don't know why they scrapped this one necessarily, but they just kind of decided that this wasn't the plan they wanted to go with. Actually, I do know what it was. It was Stalin died, and so they had a new leader. And so after his death, they actually are, mostly more honest about where missiles are, and they kind of come up with a different strategy. And so I think too, it was also, how many do you really want to kill that many people in all those different cities? And so they are more open and honest about where their missiles are. When I say open, I mean open and honest. They didn't give away everything. So that's story number 2, Einstein and his missile madness plan. All right, then we have the ice missile situation in Greenland. So, the United States was, again, this is the Cold War. There's a lot of cool missile stories with the Cold War. But in the 1960s, they came up with a plan called Project Iceworm. Now, you can imagine worms live under the ground and they dig tunnels. That's kind of what it was. They were going to use the country of Greenland because the United States and Greenland were allies, and they were trying to find the best way to use it. I don't know if you remember, it's a country covered in ice, because remember, Greenland is ice, Iceland is green, and it's a large country and it's fairly close that they could shoot missiles off from over there. So they decide to come up with this plot, and it is Project Iceworm, and what they're going to do is they're going to hide the missiles under the ice caps. And so they were going to take a ton of missiles and hide them there, but they wanted to do a test first. So what they do is they come up with Camp Century, and what they do is they dig tunnels. In these tunnels, they actually have people living there. They have a hospital. They have all kinds of things because they want to test and see like how structurally sound it could be. They even had a movie theater under there. And one person even asked like, why a movie theater? Well, during the 1960s, it was kind of movie theater heyday. And so just that was kind of what people did for fun. And so it was actually, this was even powered by an early nuclear reactor. I personally would not trust that, especially early nuclear reactor. And so they were living in these tunnels. They had about 2 years in these tunnels, and then they started to notice something. And the thing that they noticed, by the way, they used kind of steel to protect the ice because if it got warm, obviously it would melt. And they had steel that kind of kept the temperature from touching the ice. But what they started figuring out was that the temperature was changing and the ice caps were melting and they were shifting. So their structures that they built under the ice were not exactly sound, because things started to shift and like that steel and stuff would shift. And so it would not be structurally sound for them to put these missiles under there because obviously things are not as stagnant as they thought. And so they said that global warming was causing the melting and the temperature change. And so they said that they could not build these because it just wasn't structurally sound. And if you can imagine, a nuclear reactor under the ice with things shifting is not a good idea. And so that is story number 3. So I'm going to kind of remind you again. Story number 1 was the story of the pigeons. Okay. Story number 2 was the story of Einstein. I don't know if you can see these, which it's not a big deal. It's just my notes. Einstein and his Let's Attack 11 Cities Every Day. And then we have the Greenland Project Iceworm under the ice caps, which that story is pretty cool. So actually they all are kind of cool missile stories. So I'm going to pause for a second. I want you to think about what story do you think is the lie? Okay, what story do you think? Maybe the details are made up. So I'm going to give you like, I don't know, a couple seconds. I'm going to take a drink. All right. Are we ready? This is weird because you guys can't respond to me, but that's okay. All right, so story number 3, Project Iceworm, totally true. All happened. They definitely had like the hospital underground and all that kind of stuff. Totally true. Okay, so that's story number 3. So your stories are between the pigeon story. Oh, I'm throwing papers. The pigeon story, story number 1, or the Einstein story number 2. So hopefully you guys one of yours is still in there. All right, so, and some of you may have figured this out, I don't know. But the story about Einstein, sorry, my voice is going out. The story about Einstein and the 11 cities every day is totally false. I don't know if you guys remember this, but Einstein actually won a Nobel Peace Prize. And Einstein also, after he created the atomic bomb, not that he like totally regretted it, but he also kind of had said something about on the lines of, you know, what have I caused? And so, yeah, he did not work during the Cold War on missiles, at least this plan. And so, yeah, that is a false story. And so, yeah, hopefully you got it right. I know actually on the thing, some of you guys are following like who's winning. The guy who is behind actually got the story right. The other 2 picked the missile story. Nobody picked the pigeon story. It's so crazy that it's actually true. And if you're wondering, like, what? You can also look up B.F. Skinner and the pigeons, or or like pigeon missile leading and probably find articles about it if you're interested in that. Or even Project Iceworm. Like if you think those are cool, you can always look them up and research them. So anyway, I hope you have a good day. I know this video is a little longer, but I thought it'd be fun to still try to do our podcast. I hope you guys have a great day. Get some work done. But remember, you don't have to spend all day doing homework. Have a little fun too. I know it's kind of icky outside, but you guys got this. Okay, remember, questions, email me. I'll be around from 9 to 3 today again. So yeah, miss you guys, and I'll hopefully see you really soon. Bye.